Hello, and welcome to Deem Redeemable. I am your co-host, Cleveland.
And I am your host, Kenneth.
Together, we are here to share the story of a man who spent years on death row and how his journey led to redemption, faith, and transformation. Trigger warning, this story contains references to childhood abuse and trauma. We are just going to jump right into this. Ken, if nothing else, what do you want people to take away from today's episode? What is the message you want people to reflect on during and after this episode?
Well, in a recent podcast, I talked about how I had a ton of evidence of my alcoholism. When I say ism, I'm talking about the I, self, and me. And I want you to understand that my monster started long before I ever took a drink. Alcohol was just my solution to my ism. It's only a symptom, the part of the disease you can actually physically see. Now, let's come face to face with the monster inside. Have you ever heard of the expression hurt people hurt people? Well, like many others who develop a side that's volatile to what society considers normal, my selfishness and destructive behavior began as a response to childhood trauma. I've talked before about my father's death, my mother's many marriages, but what I haven't shared openly is that when I was 4 years old, I was sexually molested. It was a close family member. They molested me, and being a confused child with no male figure to actually protect or guide me, no one to model actual positive behavior or how to deal with a traumatic issue, I was left to figure things out on my own. And those choices shaped a persona that guided my young life. When I was 8 years later, my mother, she had to work a graveyard shift, and my older brother was there to watch me. Instead of doing the right thing and being a good protector and guide and watching out for me, instead he was like any other teenager. He stayed up, had friends over, experimented with different substances, and just partied. Today I get that, but I hated it at the moment because I'm a little kid. I want to go to bed. I want things to be right. And instead, I decided, well, I was going to tell on him to my mother for this partying and stuff. Well, my mother exploded in rage. She exploded in rage on me, not on him. That was the third time her emotional abuse had turned into actual violence. Um, Much younger, she had pushed me into a scalding tub of hot water and burnt my knees to where I had scabs on them that had to come off. And a year prior, she had broken my nose, dead punched me in it for just playing and breaking something. And it was right before I went to school, and she put ice on it, but it didn't stop bleeding. I went to school, and the nurse knew something was bad because my nose wouldn't quit bleeding. We found out it was broken. She blamed it on something else, and I just went with it because I'm 8. You know, that's what I was 7, but that's what a 7-year-old does, especially when he's afraid and loves his mom at the same time. With this time when she went off, she got me with a leather dog leash, and she started beating me. My mother is a rager. What she does is just goes off. I think she goes actually out of her mind, and it's how I learned to do rage. I tried to get away. She grabbed me by the hair of my head, and as I'm trying to run, she used the hair of my head as like a handle so she could beat me. And it took weeks for the welts in my head to stop hurting. During that time, I spent a lot of time figuring out how much I hated my family. and how much I needed to be something else or have something else that I didn't have at that time. Um, I started creating a persona, and this persona became my monster over time. But this persona was somebody who just wouldn't trust, who would be tougher, stronger, and harder, sort of like the $6 million man thing, you know. I was gonna make myself better, and that's where my monster began.
So, how did this affect your psyche and where did this lead you? At what age did you realize that this behavior was not okay?
I knew when it happened that this behavior from my mother and eventually other people in my family was not okay. Dysfunctional and traumatic homes act differently than what most people consider normal homes do. You accept a lot of things that are not normal and you make them normal in your mind, almost the same way that I was creating a persona and hiding behind it in order to handle the trauma and the dysfunctionality of my home. I grew into being a tough guy, not because I wanted to, but because I had to be harder. I had to be tougher to deal with the things that were happening. In sixth grade, I started fighting. It actually wasn't even sixth; it was probably fourth grade because I started being into violent things. I started fighting all the time. Even I remember that I was in at least a fight a week and always going to the principal's office. And in sixth grade, when I was leaving, he was glad and wrote in my little sixth grade yearbook, just don't get in any more fights, you know. And I did a lot of different things. I was expelled once for threatening a teacher with a hammer. I carried knives almost everywhere. Um, I started stealing, lying. I'd lie about anything. I don't care. It didn't matter whether I was about to get in trouble or not. I just lied sometimes just to see if I could get away with it. If I could make you believe something that wasn't true, not as if it was a game, but I got a little feeling out of it. And I stole from other kids. I see a bike or a skateboard look pretty cool and I could get away with stealing it. I did because I thought they had something that I should have. I know now that it's not cool, but at the time, I was a little kid. It's what I did. I even once made a psychiatrist quit seeing me because he thought I was psychotic. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't share anything. And for him, I lied and lied and lied to him. My mother tried to get me to do all kinds of things. And like, I went to the Church of Scientology, for them to see, I spent like, I don't know, 6 months in their little counseling program. And then they sent me to their Apple school to see if when you start sitting me in a room and asking me to fish swim, and I tell you, yeah, or I would say, except for flying fish, and things like that, just to mess with you. Um, I was having fun at the time. Yes, it caused a lot more problems. I started experimenting with drugs. Well, marijuana at 8. Started smoking marijuana pretty regularly around 8, 9 years old. It was cool. My brother and sister did it, so I did. 9, 10, I started drinking, experimenting. And then I had my first alcoholic drink, and this is what I call an alcoholic drink at age 12. Um, and what I mean by alcohol is I took enough drink to where I knew that this was the way that I always wanted to feel. I felt confident, I felt powerful, and I was 12. Happened on New Year's Eve, and the next morning, my mother had had enough, told me to pack a suitcase, took me to juvenile hall, said, I'm done with him. You take him because I'm not, and left and got in her car. He's gone. I went through two group homes, two foster homes. And when I got in the group home was about the only time my behavior started to metamorphosis into anything that was considered a good kid, because now I had structure. Apparently, under structure at the time, with people who cared and loved me, I would do the right thing. Started slowing down my lying, stopped stealing a little bit, unless I could get away, I think. I'm not going to say that I was perfect, but with good role models and starting to get an understanding of what a normal household should look like, started going in line. At one point, I stole a 45 caliber handgun, and I did it as an initiation type thing for a gang that I thought was going to be a gang that ended up not being a gang. But at the same time, a family member found it. They told my mother, who told my parole officer. He called me in one day. I'm not aware of everything that's happened. Sits me down next to his desk, throws handcuffs on the desk, and says, "You're either going to Boys Town in Nebraska or you're going to NYTC." NYTC was the big prison in Elko, Nevada. And when I say big prison for Nevada, it's like CYA in California. It's prison, and it's hard time. And it's in Elko, Nevada, so where you can't get away, there's nowhere to go, you know. So, of course, I said, okay, let's go to Boys Town. Before I left, my mom invited me over for my 16th birthday, and I came over to her house. My older brother's there, the one who'd picked on me all my life. I'm a little bit more grown, but I'm still not very tall. And we drink a few beers, smoke some pot, and then my brother and I get into it because my mother incites us, telling him I'm not going to get picked on no more. And so he went about proving that he could still pick on me. Again, my monster comes out. He ripped my earring out of my ear and I broke his rib. So he doesn't pick on me anymore, thankfully. These were my early years.
So, before prison, the violence, like the addictions growing underneath, may have been a way to cope with the unsafe environment, to dissociate or protect yourself from the people that were meant to guard your safety and instead were hurting you. But once inside, it probably became a whole different monster uh, than the one outside that might have actually helped you survive, or maybe it made things worse for you. So the question now for me would be, um, how did you work to keep that part of yourself under control? And once you were in prison, how did it work for you or against you?
Mm. There's a lot more before I got to prison, but I wish I could tell you that I got it under control. I really do. I had a lot of different experiences that gave me such a defensive posture to how I lived. No matter where I was, what I went through, I became a chameleon. I really didn't have a choice about going to Boys Town, but it was a very positive experience for me. My PO took the flight with me because there was a stopover in Colorado and he was afraid I was going to jump off and get missing. So I did go to Boys Town. When I got to Boys Town, it was a real change for me. I was put in an atmosphere that was different, and I thought for a little while that things might be different. I had a house family um, where Lawrence Burton, ex-football player, ex-gold, well, bronze medalist in the 72 Olympics, was my house parent. And I had never been around people that were good, and I knew it from the minute I met them. I came there. I got long hair. I'm coming into Nebraska when where it's kind of still cold. Half t-shirt, jeans, holes in my Vans, and I got one change of clothes and 2 cartons of cigarettes. You know, they told me I was going back to school. They told me I was going to quit smoking. They told me I was going to cut my hair. They told me I was going to have decent clothes to wear. And back to that part of I would do things just to prove to you that I could. So I started acting out. And Lawrence's wife told me right immediately, just as calm as you could be, well, we'll be ready to take you back to the airport in about 20 to 30 minutes. For me, I knew that if I went back to Vegas, that I was going to NYTC. And that is not what I wanted. So I said, okay. I straightened up my act. And amazingly, I started doing good in school. So well that I was able to graduate with the right amount of classes and a summer school 2 days after my 17th birthday. And right there, about 3/4 of the way through the school year, um, Lawrence and Ida sat me down and said, hey, you're not dumb. You're actually pretty smart. And you should try to think about going to college. I'd never thought about going to college. That was not in my wheelhouse. All I wanted to do was get done with this Boys Town, go back to Vegas. So I went and took the SAT, the ACT, and did well on them. So I applied. I applied to UNO, UNL, UNLV, and Creighton University. Wow. I got accepted to all of them. So I went and took the trips. I knew I was never going to Creighton. I mean, Creighton's this highfalutin, nice school in Nebraska. And I knew I wasn't going, but it was nice to take the trip. And I thought about going to either UNO or UNL, but I would have had to have some help with that financially. And, just in Nebraska, I didn't know anybody. So I thought, you know what? I should go to UNLV. Now you got to understand, this is where my cognitive distortion comes in. You see, I thought there that I could go to school, be as successful as I was in Boys Town with schooling and this new kind of way of living, and also party. That's just not true for me. Maybe some kids. I always see these movies where, yeah, they're partying, they're going to school, and they get through. That couldn't happen. I did come back to Vegas. I did all the registration process, paid some money, and then I never attended a class. I started getting my education drinking at a bar across the street from UNLV. I had an apartment down there, and in just a few months, I had spiraled. I mean, I was drinking every day. I was smoking more than pot. I was taking pills. And then I found this little wonderful white powder called cocaine. And I say wonderful because at the time, I had never felt so euphoric. Never. It made me handsome, sexy, you name it. I could do anything on it. But I also found out quickly I didn't have the money to keep that up, you know. um, but my monster was in control. This was my whirlwind. In just a few months, I'd ruined everything I'd built over that last little over a year, and so I went back to the Midwest. I ended up in Minneapolis, Minnesota with my living with a friend. He had a full ride scholarship and had an apartment, stayed with him until I had created enough havoc and pain there that my best friend hasn't spoke to me since. And I joined the Marine Corps. And eventually I committed murder in the Carolinas and went to prison.
So in that moment that you got arrested, what did you feel? And what was the monster acting like in that moment?
My exit from the Marine Corps and subsequent movement into the prison system, there was a lot of more pain and havoc that I was creating. So the monster had been in complete control. I couldn't really control any of it. Um, I could not deal without having some mind or mood altering substance in my system. And I can remember the night that I got arrested as I was being taken to jail. I felt relief. I felt like maybe somebody could control the monster because I couldn't. And I wasn't thinking of it in terms of the monster. I was just thinking somebody was going to be able to help me, I guess, do what I couldn't do. Because I think deep inside, I knew I was going to destroy myself. Never did I think that I was going to let this persona, this person I had become, get out of control and murder someone, or have every person in my life that cared about me um, not want to have anything to do with me. I mean, who wants that?
What part of the monster felt like you, and what part felt foreign, like something that was done to you?
Earlier, I said I am the monster, and I meant that. Something wasn't done to me except by me. I didn't recognize the persona, the monster, for years. It took literally years and years and getting into recovery and getting clean and knowing about other people and how they acted to understand my problems, my issues, that there was an alter persona. Now, probably the scariest part for me was actually after I'd gotten clean. I had surgery 5 years after I got clean. So you got to think, for these 5 years, even though I'm in prison, I'm clean. I'm trying to do good things. And when I'm in that hospital bed, they put morphine into my arm. And something happened in that moment. Something that made me recognize the monster more than ever. Because as that feeling went up my arm and into my chest, it was like something woke up inside me and said, it's like an alien. And it was like, that's what I want to feel like. That wasn't me. That isn't the me that sits here. It was something foreign. And that's when I realized that I needed help still, a lot of help. It probably deepened the honesty that I needed to continue staying sober and clean. So that's the most poignant identification of the monster. But again, in prison, at first, my first 11 years was the monster just doing its thing. There was a little bit of struggle. As soon as I started using again inside prison, the monster came out. And it did what it always does. It protects the innocent in me, but it also takes over. It also has to always prove itself to be tougher, harder, stronger, and it doesn't quit.
Thank you for listening to Deem Redeemable. Join us next time as we continue exploring stories of redemption, faith, and transformation. I'm Cleveland.
And I'm Kenneth. And look, if you guys want to hear about something, ask us, put it in the messages, and we'll answer by trying to do that podcast or talk about that stuff. We don't care what it is. You seek, you shall find.
Until then, remember, every journey matters, and if you are breathing, you too are deemed redeemable.
Redeemable.